Ms. Galloway, thank you for meeting with me today. I just want to start off by saying I really enjoyed watching your lesson today. It is very clear that you have solid routines in place and your students feel safe. Today we will reflect on what went well in your lesson and then a few areas of growth.
Okay.
All right. First, I want to start off with a few questions. All right, first, how do you feel that your lesson went? What was your overall feelings and your impressions of the lesson that you taught?
Well, my impression was that I think it I think it went well during the lesson. The students were actively reading the text and making annotations as they read, which is what I was looking for them to do, as well as answering their questions. I noticed as I walked around the room, the majority of the students were engaged and on task, but and also, I think the lesson met the objective, meaning that most were able to follow along and answer the comprehension questions, but I noticed that a few were off task.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I definitely noticed a bit of that too. But with this age group, that's kind of what you get sometimes. You have some students who are fully engaged, and then you always have those few who aren't engaged, either for their own personal reasons or because, they don't know what's going on or the materials, so they kind of disengage.
Okay.
What do you think contributed to those students being disengaged, in your opinion, because
Um,
you're in the classroom with them every day?
I think their disengagement was partly because we didn't have enough structured discussion opportunities inside the classrooms. Students weren't asked to share their thinking with their partners, so some just may have sat there quietly, and some may not have known, what to do.
Okay. That's a very insightful observation. How do you think adding structured discussion would change student engagement, if at all?
Um, I think it would. I think it would give students a chance to process the text and hear the different perspectives. It could also help. It could also help the quieter students participate more. So having them all to have chances of engagement and participation, in the subject matter.
Okay. Yes, it often increases engagement and helps gauge understanding in real time. Just because it's sometimes hard to keep students engaged for 10 minutes, let alone a 45-minute class, especially in reading and writing, which is one thing that they really don't seem to like to do as much. But I do appreciate you giving me that feedback. That was really, really helpful.
No problem.
So before I get into your actual ratings and your scores, I do want to remind you that all ratings are based off of evidence. So basically what I gathered during your observation as opposed to my personal feelings. Like I went strictly based off what I saw, what you said, what the students said, what they did, and what you did. And everything is documented. So if you go back and look in your T-test rubric, I kind of script and documented everything so that you can kind of see what everything was based off in case you decide, you don't agree with the rating or you want to go back and look at that feedback.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, the rubric is based off 5 dimensions. We have distinguished, meaning you are rock star teacher. You don't have any type of any type of problems in your teaching, pretty much. You can do it all. And those are usually our seasoned teachers who have been teaching for a long, 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 long time. Accomplished, meaning that you you're really close to distinguished, but there is a little bit of still room for improvement. Proficient is just regular rock solid teaching, meaning while you can still grow, you're meeting the expectations of your of teaching, your lesson planning, you're showing up, you're teaching kids the curriculum, you're following the teach, you're following the curriculum. So that's what we look at as proficient, meaning you're doing all the things at a proficient level. Then we have developing. Developing means that there is some rooms for improvement. So we come into the classroom and we may think that, okay, this teacher may need some type of professional development, or this teacher may need a co-teacher coming in to kind of help assist them. And this is usually kind of what we see with our first and second year teachers who are still trying to get into the hang of things, but they're having trouble adjusting to all the things because they have to come in, they have to learn how to do the lesson plans, learn how to put in grades, learn how to manage classroom behavior, learn how to differentiate. So it's so many things being thrown at them that sometimes they just need someone to come in and help manage those things. And then a needs improvement. Needs improvement is basically saying that you're needing someone to come in and to really assist or to show you or model for you how things are going to be done. And I know a lot of people get discouraged when they see needs improvement. We don't put needs improvement to mean you're a horrible teacher. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It just means that we see a lot of areas of growth and we want to give you that support in those areas.
Okay.
Ratings, and then we'll go from there. All right, so there were 4 domains that were covered. So we had domain 1, which is planning, and I rated you a proficient.
Okay.
Okay, so rock solid teaching and planning.
Mm-hmm.
My evidence was that the lesson was aligned with the TEKS 8.6a, focusing on identifying the main idea and supporting it with textual evidence. The learning objective was clearly stated and visible for students. Lesson materials were prepared and the teacher selected a grade appropriate text. So my favorite chaperone, the text you chose was grade appropriate and that it did align with the TEKS and with the curriculum.
Okay.
While the instructional sequence was clear, opportunities for student interaction or discussion were limited. Activities primarily consisted of teacher-led reading and questioning. Some scaffolds were evident, but not all students appeared consistently engaged through the lesson. And so the reason I gave you proficient is because while your knowledge of the lesson and of the curriculum and of the TEKS was very rock solid, a lot of the students didn't get a chance to express their own learning or to show their learning. For example, a turn and talk or just having them, share whatever they wrote down on their paper, whether it was their answers to their main idea questions. So a lot of times we want to see more student-led learning than teacher-led learning. Now it's one thing for the teacher to be modeling and then the kids to be doing their part, kind of like a I do, then a you do, or a I do, we do. But I noticed a lot of it was mostly teacher-led. You did use some scaffolds, which were really good. But I did notice that some of the students weren't really engaged, and I did notice that some of those students were some of your lower students on your roster, and it may be because they didn't understand it, which causes disengagement and causes kids to get off task. When they don't know something, they kind of don't pay it any attention.
Okay.
Within domain 1, we have standard 1.1, which is standards and alignment. I gave you accomplished. We had 1.2, data and assessment. I gave you proficient. We had 1.3, knowledge of students. I gave you proficient. And 1.4, activities. I gave developing just because the students were not, all of the students were not engaging in the activities.
Okay.
The rationale for domain 1, Planning, reflecting, and understanding of the TEKS alignment and student needs, but the lesson design could be strengthened through structured opportunities for students to share, collaborate, and demonstrate understandings in varied ways. Did you have any questions about that domain?
No, no, not at all. I agree. Yes.
Okay. Domain 2 is over instruction. On domain 2, I gave developing. My evidence and justification are the teacher presented the lesson in a clear and organized manner, but instruction was primarily teacher directed. Students followed along as the teacher read portions of the text. However, several students were not engaged or following along. Opportunities for students to to process and discuss the text were minimal, and there were no structured turn and talks or group interactions, which is what we really want to see in classrooms, just because when we see kids talking to each other and interacting with each other, we know they're learning. When kids are able to kind of put back out what you gave to them, it kind of shows their level of understanding. Questioning strategies were limited to basic comprehension checks, and few students were called upon to explain their thinking or cite evidence independently. And I noticed a lot of students were kind of looking around, waiting for other students to answer, like they didn't feel confident in within their answers. So a lot of times, pushing those students to answer questions. And then another thing you can use is like cold calling, like whether they have some teachers use the spinning wheel, some teachers use popsicle sticks, because those kids who never answer questions, they're gonna always like kind of fade to the back. And we don't want that. So I would just try to implement a system to where you can randomly call on kids who would never normally raise their hand, just so that all kids are getting the opportunity to speak on their learning.
And that makes sense. That definitely does make sense.
All right, and our standards for this domain are achieving expectations, developing, and that was with the teacher-led learning. Content and knowledge expertise, proficient. It was very clear that you know exactly what you were teaching and that you were able to deliver the lesson in an effective way. Communication was proficient. You spoke to the children multiple times. It was very clear that you had expectations and routines in place. Differentiation, developing, just because, like I said, some of those extra opportunities for students were not given. And then monitor and adjust, developing. Just sometimes when we see, like, for example, when you see that some kids weren't answering questions, like being able to kind of shift within our lessons, like noticing things in that moment and being like, okay, I need to change something or I need to add something, which is a very hard skill. But sometimes as teachers, we're used to teaching the same lessons over and over, and it's hard for us to just like switch in the middle of a lesson, especially depending on the type of class you have or the students. So I definitely understand how that can be difficult. In my rationale, the instruction met the basic lesson objective, but lacked depth in the student engagement and formative assessment. Increasing interactive strategies and questioning will help move students toward higher levels of comprehension and independence. So when I mentioned formative assessment, not giving the students an actual test, but after they're answering those main idea questions and they're checking for text evidence, especially because these are TEKS that are usually our lowest and students usually don't do too well on, like kind of just having some form of check for understanding to see, so you can kind of document what kids got it and what kids didn't in that moment, to kind of sit back when you're planning and being like, okay, this is what I need to reteach. This is what I have to pull for small group. Especially those like small group interventions, like those kids, those tier 1 and tier 2 students, like being able to pull them and give them those supports.
Okay.
All right, domain 3. Am I going too fast? Are you kind of keeping up with me? If not, don't hesitate to tell me to slow down.
Oh no, no, I definitely I'm following along and I definitely agree, especially with the student portion of it. So yeah, so I'm definitely following along. You're doing fine.
Okay. So our next domain is domain 3, the learning environment. I gave you a rating of proficient. My evidence shows that classroom environment was calm and generally positive. Students were respectful towards the teacher and peers. Classroom expectations were evident and transitions were smooth. A few students were not consistently attentive or following the reading, and redirection was minimal. While the environment was orderly, the level of academic engagement could be strengthened through structural opportunities for collaboration and accountability. So sometimes having students going back to that peer interaction, sometimes when students get bored, they start to drift off. So maybe having them get up and stand up, like, okay, go find somebody with the same shoes as you, or go find somebody who's wearing the same color as you, just to kind of get them up and moving, to get their brains going, because sometimes when they're bored they start to drift off and disconnect and possibly fall asleep. So we just want to always keep them on their toes. Our standard highlights: 3.1, environment, routines, and procedures. I gave you accomplished because it was very evident that it was a safe environment. Routines were in place and the students understood those routines and the procedures. There was very minimal redirection, and when you did have to redirect, students got it together. Managing student behavior, proficient. As I said, when you had to redirect students, there was no disrespectful talking back or any type of situations that would have made me think that there were not routines and rules in place. And then the classroom culture, I also did proficient. Students seemed to feel safe. The students that did share, they seemed very comfortable sharing, which showed me that this is something that they're used to doing, as opposed to being hesitant or feeling like they're or being afraid to speak. Some students are afraid to speak because the fear of being judged or being wrong. And I could see that that was not the case. The rationale: this classroom was safe and organized, but student engagement and self-monitoring could be improved by incorporating routines that hold students accountable for participation and comprehension. So maybe implementing something to where if everybody's expectation is to be reading a text and you have two or three students who are not, I would probably put something in place, whether it's you coming over and having a private conversation with that student, or having a system to where you hold up some kind of color or something that's non-disruptive to those students that are participating, but just giving those students who are not, like, kind of like a heads up, like if you don't get it together, you know that this is coming up next, or just a reminder so that they can kind of get back on task. Then we have domain 4, professional practices and responsibilities. You scored accomplished, which was really good. The teacher demonstrated professionalism and and receptiveness during the post-conference. The teacher reflected honestly on the lesson and expressed interest in implementing more student-centered strategies. Our highlights were professional demeanor and ethics. You got accomplished. Goal setting, proficient. Professional development, proficient. And school community involvement, accomplished. My rationale was that the teacher's reflective nature and openness to feedback support ongoing professional growth and continue focus on student learning. After hearing these ratings, do you have any questions, or do you have anything that you would like to interject on, or any rating that you do not agree with?
No, actually, I think it's kind of spot on. I did know the lack of engagement from students. It was kind of anticipated, some too, but you are right. It was more teacher led because they was kind of looking for me to do certain things, and we kind of want to do that switch around to where now we're having them to speak more on what's going on for them for teachers to understand that they understand the material, they understand what's going on in the lesson, and it just gives us a better gauge sometimes instead of just scoring. Sometimes when the students are speaking and the students are talking, we can have a better panoramic view of what their overall academic sense is on that lesson plan. I mean on that lesson or on that subject matter, and it also adds context to the grade too. So where a student might be low in on the actual assignment, but if they start to talk about it and they start to show you that they do understand stuff, they do understand the things that are going on, then the teacher can also see that, oh, okay, he has a very thorough understanding or his comprehension is very good. And that way you can adjust the grade because even though he may not have done well on the actual paper, he did very well in explaining what the subject matter was. So that's a good way. So of course, I definitely agree that that students should talk more and participate more and do more group work and conversate with each other. So I definitely agree with that.
Okay, I've definitely taken all that in and written it down. That's why I always try to give teachers the opportunity to not only see the ratings, but to get a full explanation of not just what the ratings were, but why, what came with them, just so that they have a better understanding of what it is that I saw and how it was processed and what my rationale was for each domain based off the evidence.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to kind of talk about your areas for growth, okay? And these are some of our next steps that that I feel will be best. I feel our focus area or our area of refinement will be increasing student engagement through structured opportunities to share thinking and apply comprehension skills independently. Just because comprehension is always one of those really touchy areas, just because students have a hard time. They can read all day, but understanding what they read is typically the hard part. Even in our even in our junior high grades, even in eighth grade, even though we expect for them to do X, Y, and Z, the reality of the situation is that we still have a lot of kids who are struggling with reading comprehension. During the observation, and the reasoning for this area of focus is that during the observation, students were primarily passive participants, meaning that they kind of were able to pick and choose when they wanted to participate. And we're kind of wanting students to be wanting to participate. And the lack of participation isn't because students aren't learning, it's because those students who don't get it, they don't want to voice their learning. They don't want to talk about what the answers are because their fear of how they're going to look in front of their peers or the fear of not knowing and looking stupid in front of the class or things like that. And which is very, kids take that serious and especially at this age, they care more about what their peers think than anything else. So we just want to kind of give kids that push to be able to feel confident enough to know that even if you do answer a question and you get it wrong, it's okay. Only a few students interacted or shared responses, while others appeared disengaged. The structured academic discussions, partner collaborations, and formative checks will help improve comprehension and accountability. So some of our next action steps are going to be to improve and incorporate turn talks or paired discussions after key reading segments. So whenever you guys are reading a text, just making sure you put in there a moment, or whether it's 30 seconds or 2 minutes, for kids to have a moment to talk to each other, whether it's sharing their answer, whether it's talking about what they think is going to happen next, whether it's making an inference, just giving them a chance to kind of talk to each other. Or say you have a question that you're about to ask and you put the question on the board and you want to give kids a chance to discuss the answers and think about it before they have to answer out loud. So now they've written it down on their paper. They've had a chance to share it with the peer, and now they'll feel more confident saying their answer out loud. Use guided questions that require students to cite evidence before sharing. So questions that come with maybe like a B, C, or D, and then students have a chance to answer that question ahead of time. And then, like I said before, they're feeling more confident when they have to, if they're called on to answer the question out loud. And then provide explicit modeling of how to answer with evidence and prompt students reflection on their responses. Now, while I think you did a very good job of modeling, some kids don't know how to answer the question, which is what I would do is whenever you have a question, I would start putting sentence stems on the board for those students who may have a hard time even starting what they want to say or not knowing exactly how to start off their answer, so that they have that there to use as a guiding tool. Are those some things that you have used before? And like, I know I just seen this one lesson, but in your classes in general, do you normally have kids turn and talk, or do you have them do anything like that? Or would this be something you'll be implementing for the first time?
I do have group discussions inside my classroom, where I call it conscious talk, meaning that, we discuss, we go over what's going on, and um, the students give their view, and I try to have them to relate it to something that is going on in real time or currently. So usually they'll tell me about a Netflix movie or something that's going on. If they can, I notice that if they can relate it to something that is currently going on, whether it be in social media, whether it be in arts and entertainment, or whatever the case may be, they tend to grasp it more. They tend to understand it more. And even the kids who are silent, they tend to, even though they may not say much, they it's like a light bulb coming on. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it now, because now they can actually relate the subject matter to something that they actually know, or something that is going on, currently, for them, or in their social realm. So yes, I do things like that. And as far as prompting, um, I usually pass out, papers. Education is not a mystery. So I usually pass out papers and just have them to, with just like starters. Sometimes it's just getting that first sentence off, or getting that first line off, to get their thoughts going, to get their thoughts rolling. So yeah, I do that. I don't do it as often maybe as I should, and especially for those students who are, especially for the quiet students, or the students who are not confident learners or confident speakers in my class.
Okay, that's definitely understandable. And I think that that's great because, like I said, kids at that age, they have such a hard time just doing anything. Getting them to do anything is like pulling teeth. So when we can implement things into the class that make it a little bit more easier for them, I think that helps a lot. Alrighty. All right. I'm gonna go over your professional growth goal, because usually what I like to do is I like to create a SMART goal, a goal that can be measured over time. So by the end of the semester, the teacher will increase student engagement and comprehension through structured academic discussions and evidence-based responses, as measured by higher levels of participation and improved accuracy in citing evidence. So what that means is that by the end of the semester, I would say at least 3 to 4 times you would have given students an opportunity to either turn and talk or share their ideas, and even sharing their ideas. So, for example, say you have an odd number of students and you have that one student who doesn't have a partner, you can always step in and be like, you know what, you can be my partner. You can share with me. So, just making sure that they all have an opportunity to share with someone, especially if it's a peer, just because I feel like they feel more comfortable talking to each other as opposed to talking out loud. And if they can kind of get over that fear by sharing with someone that they feel comfortable with, I think when they finally share a whole group, that it will make a difference. The evidence of your progress. I will perform a walkthrough observation to look for consistent use of collaborative discussion routines. Student responses include accurate textual evidence in written and oral formats. So that means if I see them answering questions when I'm in the classroom, or for example, I don't know if you do exit tickets or not, but if you have some type of exit ticket that shows that they shared with a partner, or them and a partner did some kind of partner assignment or anything like that, anything that shows evidence that there was some type of peer interaction going on. And then lesson plans reflect structure opportunities for student discourse. So just in your lesson plans, just making sure that you're planning for a moment of student talk. The timeline will be implementation, the next instructional unit. So I know you guys are finishing up, I think, unit 3. So at some point within your next unit, just making sure that you're implementing that. I will check in mid-semester, and I'll collect any work that you have, any work samples or exit tickets at your next PLC. And then the follow-up observation, either we can meet in person, we can talk via email, and you can just kind of give me feedback on how you think that went. Like, do you think that implementing those opportunities for students to engage, do you think it did well in the lesson, or do you think that that's something that negatively affected the lesson? Because I have had teachers to where they have classes that they just have a hard time getting back on task after they've had that moment to kind of debrief and talk with their peers, and then now they can't bring them back. So you would just keep me posted on that. How do you feel about that growth goal? Do you feel like that's something that's attainable? Do you feel like it's like you need some kind of support in achieving this goal?
No, it's definitely something that is attainable. I think I'm able to do it to where it can be classroom wide, or it can be individual too, or it can be group. And that's the good thing about it, is that I can make it widespread, to help everyone, or I can make it very intimate if there's a student that is struggling or who may need little bit more support. And I can do that one on one, or I can make it into a group to where now I'm really getting the whole classroom engaged. But like you said, it's more student led versus it being teacher led.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. So we're going to talk about some of your strengths and celebrations. All right, I want to highlight some strengths. First, your lesson was aligned to the TEKS, which is very important. A lot of times before even going into the lesson, because you sent me your lesson plan, I go in, I look at what your objective is, what your learning and your content objective are. What is your success criteria? What do you expect for students to have accomplished and learned by the end of the class? And then I go and look at the curriculum planning guide, and I see if they align. And I noticed that everything was aligned perfectly to the TEKS, which was great. Your objective was clear. It was posted on the board, and it was in your slides, which was really good. So for those students who maybe missed it on the slides, they still have an opportunity to look at the board and see it. The materials were well prepared and pacing was smooth. You weren't going super fast. When students had questions, you made sure to to repeat your questions, or to kind of go back and make sure that students have full understanding. The classroom was calm and respectful, which is a strong foundation for learning, because I've been in some chaotic classes. So I know what it's like when it's chaotic, because you can't learn in chaos. Because when you're having to constantly redirect a child, or take a child out in the hallway, or tell them to sit down, stop moving, that disrupts the learning environment.
It does.
I didn't see any of that there. So that was really good. Um, oh, you were also honest in reflecting on what could be improved. And that's one
Okay.
thing that I really like, when teachers can see kind of see the things that may have went wrong, or that the areas that they need to grow before I even see them. Because I know sometimes we go through a lesson and there's moments where we be like, oh, I should have did this, or when I do this, when I do this next time, I'm gonna do this. Like, we always think of things. Because I remember when I was teaching, I would always tell myself, like, my first period, they were always like my test dummy class. Like, I would teach something with them and I would be like, okay, no, this is not gonna work. And I knew for second period I needed to change this, or sometimes I would be like, and just throw the whole lesson out. We got to do something totally different, because if these kids aren't getting it, then I know that period second, third, and fourth aren't going to get it. So sometimes we as teachers we do have to take a step back and just realize in the moment, is this working or is it not working, and kind of be able to pivot according to our students.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I wanted to make sure that the students were actively thinking and not just listening. So, so yeah, I'm very, I do kind of take mental notes of what it is that I'm doing or what I am not doing.
Yes, and that was definitely clear in what I seen. It was very clear. All right, your growth and refinement. So we kind of went over like your growth goal and what that's going to look like and how I'm going to observe that. But based on our decision, the main area for growth is increasing student engagement through through structured discussion and formative checks. Here are a few strategies that I feel like you could try. You don't have to use all of these. But if you can just if you have a sticky note or piece of paper, you can just write these down so that you can have them and you can, put them in your teacher toolbox and you can use them, or you can come up with your own.
Okay.
So the first one would be to use turn and talks or small group discussions after key text selections. Sorry. So after students read, you can just say, okay, guys, what was the main idea? And then you can give them an opportunity to write it down. And then for 30 seconds, you tell them each partner gets 15 seconds. Share your main idea with your partner. Partner A, partner B. Partner A shares their main idea. Partner B shares their main idea. And then you guys can come back whole group. And then those students, you can say, okay, I want partners A's to stand up. And then they get a chance to share. And then you pick 3 or 4 students who are in group, who are partner A, and they share out. And then maybe the next time you do it, you can do partner B, or you can do, partner 1 and 2, however you do it, to kind of keep kids on their toes. When we switch it up, they don't know what to expect. The second one is to ask guided questions that require students to cite evidence before sharing. So questions that kind of allow the student to prepare for their answer rather than like on the spot. Because when they're on the spot, their fear is always, if I get it wrong, everybody's going to think X, Y, and Z. So just kind of giving them guided questions that require them to have to go back into the text or have to go and look for the answer so that they have more of a probability of getting the answer correct. And they've had that time to think. And I think another big important thing about sharing with your peers is sometimes kids get to hear what someone else says, because maybe they might have a student who's at a higher level sitting next to them. And a lot of times kids pay attention. They know what their answer is, and then they hear someone else's answer. And kids can rationalize. They can be like, okay, well, my answer didn't sound like that answer. So maybe I need to go and change my answer somehow to make it sound a little bit different. So I also think working in pairs and working with your peers also pushes kids to want to do better.
I agree.
What is my third one? Incorporate quick written checks. So those are what I was talking about earlier when I said formative assessments. So just allowing students to write things down. You can say, all right, guys, what is the main idea of this text? You guys have 1 minute. I'm going to come around and I'm going to check everybody write their main idea on a sticky note. And I'm going to come around. And also another good thing to do, so you can have like a quick formative assessment so you can quickly grade who got it right, who got it wrong. You can do like a check and circle system. If the student didn't get the answer right, you can give them a little circle. And then if they did get it right, you can give them a check. I don't like to use X's because kids associate X's with wrong, like it's wrong, like there's no coming back from it. So I like to do circles. Circle means that you just need to circle back and try that answer again. A check means that you got it right. And then sometimes I know I used to give students a chance, like ask three before me. So giving students a chance to go and talk with their peers before actually coming to you for the answer. And a lot of times the students will figure it out. Those are really good for exit tickets. So at the end of the day, so say for example, you're running out of time, you only got 3, 4 minutes left of class. You can have them write those main ideas on their sticky notes, and then on their way out the door, you can have them just stick them on your door, and then you can collect them and grade them at a later time.
Okay.
That's also a good way of formative assessment. And then my last one was to model how to explain reasoning with text evidence before student responds. Now, text evidence is a tricky one because the number one thing is kids don't like going back into the text. That's always a hard one because it's the laziness. They just don't want to go back into the text, so they rather just paraphrase or guess. And I think if you actually model it for them and show them how going back into the text makes it so much easier when it comes to answering questions. I know some teachers teach kids to read the questions first and then read the text or whatever the strategy may be. But I think that when kids see teachers do it, I think it makes a big difference. And sometimes modeling in front of kids and making those common mistakes that you know that they would make makes it a lot easier because sometimes kids think teachers live in this perfect world and we don't make mistakes. But when they see us make those mistakes, like in our writing, put like for example, making a starting a sentence with a lowercase letter, seeing if kids catch on to it or catching your own mistakes, being like, oh, I put a lowercase letter for the first. Am I supposed to do that? Is that proper sentence structure? And just having them think out loud too. I think that helps a lot too. Kids can see teachers make mistakes and just kind of realize that it's okay. It's okay to make a mistake as long as you fix
That is true.
it. How do you feel about using exit tickets? Like giving kids the opportunity to learn a lesson and then say, this is what I learned at the end of the lesson. Like whether I got it or I didn't get it. As opposed to, because if you ask kids, did everybody learn? Did everybody learn X, Y, and Z today? Of course, everybody's going to say yes. Nobody's ever going to say no. But having that actual proof of they got it or they didn't get it. Like, how do you like having something like that?
I'm not like that. I think using an exit ticket after every section could help the students see, could help me see which students are engaged and understanding the material. And sometimes it's not just about sometimes some kids do know the answer, they just don't feel like giving the answer, or they just don't feel like doing the work or things like that. And it's just a way to kind of like have those conversations that you might not necessarily have either with students either. So now you can have those kind of intimate conversations with kids about about what's going on with them, because then when they're on one with you, they might open up with you and say, well, I understood this, but I really didn't understand this part of it or whatever. So now, now we getting somewhere and we having a better understanding about, what's going on with the students. So yes, I do like the exit ticket strategy.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's always beneficial. I don't think I've seen yet teacher that uses it and doesn't love it just because it's easy and it's quick and you get the feedback that you need. All right. I know we've been in our meeting for a while, but I'm just gonna wrap things up for us. So I know you have a class coming up in the next few minutes. So I'm gonna make this quick for you. So to summarize, your lesson was well prepared. It was aligned to all standards. Um, as we said, engagement needs to be strengthened through your student discussion and accountability strategies. Your goal for the next unit is to implement at least one structured turn and talk or partner discussion after each reading segment and collect evidence of understanding through a quick check.
Okay, I will plan for that for the next lesson, and then I can bring some of the student work samples to the PLC for feedback.
Okay, perfect, perfect. All right, I'll do a follow-up walkthrough during the next unit to observe how these strategies are supporting student engagement and comprehension. And I really want to thank you for your reflection and openness in today's meeting. I really enjoyed your lesson, and I look forward to your next two 15-minute formal observations.
And thank you. Thank you. I really do feel more confident in actively engaging my students in reading and having them to participate with each other and having to be more student led. So thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, I'm not going to hold you too much longer, Miss Galloway. You go ahead and get to your class, and you have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you, Ms. Pearson.
You're welcome.